The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was watering my begonias on the back porch. "He's gone." My son Daniel's voice was smooth, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it, passed in his sleep around 4. "The hospice nurse is there now." I set down the watering can. My hands didn't shake. After 15 years of watching my husband Martin slowly disappear, I'd made my peace with this moment 100 times over. What surprised me was the silence on the other end of the line, not grief, not the catching of breath that comes when a child loses a parent, just silence, waiting. "The attorney's office called yesterday," Daniel continued. "Reading is set for Friday at 10. Hargrove and Blythe on Elm Street. I assume you'll want to be there." Something in the way he said it. "I assume you'll want to be there." Like my presence was an afterthought, a formality. Like he already knew something I didn't. "Of course," I said. "Good." And then he hung up. I stood on that porch for a long time, looking at the begonias. Martin had helped me plant the spring before his first stroke. That was 15 years ago. We didn't know then. We thought it was stress from the new job, that he'd rest up over the weekend and be fine by Monday. He was never fine by Monday again. Martin Calloway, 41 years of marriage. The man who used to leave folded notes in my nursing shoes before early shifts. The man who cried at every single one of our grandchildren's birthdays without fail. Every single time. And then pretended he had allergies. The man who spent the last 4 years unable to hold a fork, unable to say my name, but who still squeezed my hand every morning when I came into his room. 2 squeezes. His way of saying good morning. I know he knew it was me. I gave up my nursing position 3 months into his illness, when it became clear he needed full-time care. Some people retire. I just redirected. The agency offered to send someone, and we could have afforded it. Then Martin's investment portfolio was healthy. The house was paid off. His pension was solid. But Martin had always been proud and private. The idea of strangers bathing him, managing his medications, making decisions about his body. I saw the panic in his eyes the one time I suggested it. So I stayed. 15 years. Daniel never understood that choice. He was 42, a corporate attorney in Boston, and he had opinions about everything. About how the house should be managed, about Martin's medical decisions, about what constituted a reasonable quality of life. He drove down from Boston twice a year, stayed for 3 days, offered a great many thoughts on how I was doing things wrong, and then drove back to his life. My younger daughter, Claire, was different. She called every Sunday without fail, flew in for every major medical appointment, and on her last visit had sat beside her father's bed for 6 hours, holding his hand and reading him old Sports Illustrated articles because someone had told her familiar voices helped. She lived in Portland, had 3 kids and a demanding job as a high school principal, and still she showed up, every single time. My middle son, Paul, was somewhere in between, present enough to love his father, absent enough that the weight of caregiving never touched him. He felt guilty about that, I think. He showed it by sending grocery deliveries I didn't need and calling too late at night. Daniel felt no guilt at all. In the last 2 years of Martin's life, Daniel came more frequently. I noticed but said nothing. He and his father would sit alone in the room for long stretches, which I had always encouraged. I wanted Martin to have as much time with his children as possible. But once, I passed the door and heard Daniel's voice, low and careful. "She never had a real career anyway, Dad. She gave up a part-time nursing job. Let's be honest about what that was worth." I kept walking. I didn't say anything. Martin couldn't respond coherently by then anyway. Or so I believed. The morning of the reading, I dressed carefully. Not to impress anyone, I was 63 years old and had long since stopped dressing for rooms, but because Martin had always said I looked like myself when I wore blue. So I wore the blue cardigan he'd given me for our 35th anniversary. It was old. I didn't care. Hargrove and Blythe occupied the 2nd floor of a narrow brick building downtown, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and central air conditioning. Daniel was already there when I arrived, standing in the hallway with his wife, Renata, both of them in sharp, dark suits. He glanced at my cardigan. He didn't say anything, but Renata smiled, the particular smile that isn't one. "Mom." He nodded. Claire arrived 2 minutes later, breathless and apologetic, her coat half-buttoned. She hugged me properly, both arms, the way she had since she was small. "How are you doing? Actually doing?" "I'm all right, sweetheart." Paul came in just behind her, looking like he'd slept in his clothes. He kissed my cheek and squeezed my arm once, and then we all filed into the conference room. Robert Hargrove had been Martin's attorney for nearly 20 years. He was in his late 60s, the kind of man who seemed to have been born in a tie, and he greeted each of us with the same measured warmth, not cold, not effusive, professional. He'd represented both of us when we'd updated our joint will a decade ago. I hadn't spoken to him since. He met my eyes when I sat down, and for just a moment there was something deliberate in it. Something I couldn't name. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "I know this is a difficult time. Martin was very specific about how he wanted this handled, and I intend to honor those wishes exactly." Daniel settled into his chair with the ease of a man who had already mentally redecorated the house. Renata set a legal pad on the table in front of him. She actually brought a legal pad. Hargrove opened a leather folder and began, the formal language of it being of sound mind, revoking all prior instruments, appointing executor washed over me. I wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about the way Martin used to hum old Springsteen songs when he thought no one was listening. I was thinking about 2 squeezes every morning for 15 years. Then Hargrove reached the bequests. To my son Daniel Edward Calloway, he read, "I leave my 1967 Ford Mustang, currently in storage." Daniel's chin lifted slightly. The Mustang had been a point of pride, Martin's one indulgence, restored over years, worth maybe $40,000 on a good day. To my son Paul Andrew Calloway, "I leave my woodworking tools and equipment, currently stored in the garage, and my collection of first edition baseball books." Paul made a small sound. He and Martin had spent hours in that garage. To my daughter Claire Marie Calloway Reed, "I leave my mother's china set, my coin collection, and the sum of $15,000. Claire pressed her lips together. Her eyes were wet. And to my wife, Patricia Ann Calloway Hargrove paused briefly. "I leave the sum of $500. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Daniel laughed. It wasn't loud. It was controlled. The way he controlled everything, a short, deliberate sound, exhaled through his nose with a slight shake of his head, as if the room had just confirmed something he'd always known. "Well," he said, settling back in his chair with the ease of a man arranging himself for a photograph, "I suppose that says everything, doesn't it?" I looked at him. 15 years, he continued, glancing at Renata. 15 years and $500. Dad wasn't sentimental. "Daniel." Claire's voice was sharp. "I'm just observing." "Stop observing." I said nothing. I folded my hands on the table and looked at Robert Hargrove's face, and what I saw there was not discomfort. He wasn't embarrassed or apologetic. He was waiting. The same way a person waits at the top of a hill before pushing something over the edge. He turned the page. "There is a second document," Hargrove said, and his voice had shifted not dramatically, but the way a key changes when it finds the right lock. "Martin updated this will 14 months ago. At that time, he also executed a separate legal instrument that he instructed me to present concurrent with the will reading. He was very clear. No exceptions." Daniel frowned. "What separate instrument?" "A revocable living trust." Hargrove set down the will and picked up a bound document. "Established 18 months ago, I have physician documentation confirming Martin's mental competency at the time of signing 3 separate evaluations, 2 of which were requested by Martin himself." He looked at Daniel. He anticipated the competency question. Renata's pen stopped moving. "The trust designates a single primary beneficiary." Hargrove looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. "Patricia Ann Calloway." I heard Claire inhale. "Assets held in trust include the family home at 4418 Birchwood Lane, currently appraised at $430,000. Martin's investment portfolio, transferred to the trust 18 months ago, currently valued at $1.4 million. A life insurance policy with a death benefit of $800,000, for which the trust is named beneficiary. And a savings account in the trust's name containing $260,000. Daniel had gone very still. "In total," Hargrove said, "the trust transfers to Patricia Calloway approximately $2.9 million in assets, including the family home." "That's," Daniel started. "There's more," Hargrove said. Not unkindly, not triumphantly, simply, he picked up a separate envelope. It was sealed with regular tape, not wax, not anything formal, and Martin's handwriting was on the front, his cramped, left-tilted print that had changed over the years from quick and certain to slow and deliberate. He'd written our names, all four of us. And then, below, in slightly larger letters, "Read this out loud, all of it, no exceptions." Hargrove opened it. The pages inside were not legal documents. They were yellow legal pad paper, covered in handwriting, not the careful handwriting of a man composing something official, but the handwriting of a man who had something to say and was afraid he might run out of time before he said it. "I'm going to read this in full," Hargrove said, as Martin requested. Daniel said nothing. His jaw was tight. Renata had set down the pen. Hargrove began. "To my children, Daniel, Paul, and Claire, and to my wife, Patricia, who is the reason any of this exists. I'm writing this on a Tuesday afternoon in November, while Patricia is at her water aerobics class, which she goes to every week and comes home from in a better mood, and I have always loved that about her, that she finds small things to look forward to no matter what. I'm going to be gone soon. My doctors have been honest with me, and I have been trying to be honest with myself, and I want to use whatever time I have left to tell the truth about some things. First, about the will. I left Patricia $500 in the will on purpose. Daniel, I know you're sitting there with that look on your face. I know exactly what that look looks like because I watched you practice it in the mirror when you were 11 years old, preparing for a debate competition. You always were thorough. I left her $500 in the will because I knew you would find out the contents before the reading. I'm not saying how I know that. I'm saying I know it. And I wanted you to feel certain for exactly as long as it took Hargrove to turn a page. I wanted you to understand how it feels to be sure of something that isn't true. Patricia has been caring for me for 15 years. 15 years. I want you to sit with that number. She gave up her nursing career, and Daniel, it was a career, not a part-time job. She was charge nurse at Riverside Medical for 12 years and was 3 months from a promotion when I had my first stroke. She gave it up without one word of complaint or negotiation. She did not ask me if I thought it was fair. She did not calculate what it would cost her. She just stayed. She has bathed me, medicated me, advocated for me in 4 different hospital rooms against doctors who were not listening. She has slept in a recliner beside my bed for the past 2 years because I was frightened at night, and she did not want me to be frightened alone. She has answered the same question, "What day is it, Patty?" approximately 10,000 times, and every single time she told me the day, the date, and something that was happening that day worth looking forward to. I know what I cost her. I want to make sure you all know too. Daniel, I am going to be direct with you now, because I don't have time left to be tactful, and because I think you are a smarter person than the choices you've been making. Over the past 2 years, you have come to visit me more frequently. I know why. I was not as impaired as you believed. There were days I couldn't form sentences, yes. There were weeks the words wouldn't come. But I could hear. I could understand. I watched you talk to me about your mother in a low voice in my room. I watched you characterize her care as obligation, and her career as negligible, and her future needs as manageable on a modest fixed income. I want you to understand something. Your mother chose to be here every day. She made that choice over and over, every morning, for 15 years. There is no sum of money that repays that. But I am trying anyway. The trust is not everything she's owed. It's everything I have. I am not punishing you, Daniel. I am not writing you out of my life. The Mustang is yours because you and I spent 8 months restoring that car together when you were 17, and those were some of the best days I have ever had, and I want you to have something that holds that. But I need you to look at your mother and actually see her. Not as a variable in an estate plan, not as a person who gave up a negligible career. As someone who chose, every single day for 15 years, to put another human being's life above her own. I need you to ask yourself what that's worth. To Claire, you already know. You've always known. Thank you for every Sunday call. Thank you for the Sports Illustrated articles. Thank you for being the kind of person your mother can be proud of without having to say so. To Paul, I know you feel guilty. Stop. I know you showed up in the ways you could. That matters. To my wife, Hargrove paused and cleared his throat once, then continued. Patricia. I have been trying to write this part for 3 weeks. I keep starting it wrong. I'll try to just say it plainly. You are the best thing that happened in my life. That is not a small thing to say. I have had a good life. I built something at the company I'm proud of. I have 3 children who turned out to be real people. I've had decades of Sundays and barbecues and Christmas mornings and bad movies on the couch. And the best part of all of it was you. Before the illness, during, right now, knowing you're at water aerobics, and you'll come home and tell me what Donna said that was funny, and you'll sit with me a while before dinner. I know I cost you something you can't get back. Time, the career you were building, the version of your 60s that didn't involve hospital equipment in the living room. I've thought about that a lot, what your life might have looked like if I hadn't gotten sick, and I've decided you probably would have been extraordinary at it, because you are extraordinary at everything you commit to. I'm leaving you the trust because this house is yours more than it was ever mine. Because you built this life and maintained it and kept it livable when everything in it was falling apart. Because the investments grew because you managed our finances carefully while I wasn't able to, and that money belongs to the person who protected it. I'm leaving it to you because you deserve it, and because I'm stubborn enough to insist. I hope you travel. You always wanted to go to Scotland. Go to Scotland. Take Claire. I hope you sleep in past 7 o'clock. I know you haven't done that in 15 years. I hope you plant things. You were always good at making things grow. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't say it correctly at the end. When the words stopped working. I need you to know that every time I squeezed your hand, I meant it. Every single time. 2 squeezes. I know it's you. Always. Martin. Hargrove set the pages down and took off his reading glasses and folded them carefully, and that was the only sound in the room for a long moment. Claire was crying quietly, her face turned toward the window. Paul had his head down, one hand over his eyes. Daniel was not crying. He sat very still, looking at the table. His face had done something I hadn't seen it do in a long time. It had opened, the way faces do when the architecture people build to hold themselves together suddenly gives way. He looked for a moment, like the boy who had spent 8 months restoring a car with his father in the garage. Young, unsure of himself, a little lost. I was not thinking about the money. I was thinking about 2 squeezes, every morning, and the fact that he had known, all this time, even at the end when I thought the understanding had left him, he had known it was me. Mom. Daniel's voice was different now, quieter. The practiced smoothness was gone. Was it really that bad? The things I said? I looked at my son. Really looked at him. He was wearing his father's expression, the one Martin used to have when he knew he'd gotten something wrong and was working up to admitting it. I had forgotten how much Daniel looked like his father. You were making plans, I said. People make plans. I understand that. That's not an answer. No, I said. It wasn't that bad on any single day. It was 15 years of single days, and that adds up. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I thought I told myself you were fine, that you were doing what you wanted. I was doing what I wanted, I said. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard. He looked at the table. I should have come more. Yes. I should have helped more. Yes. I know, I said. Because I did. Because he was his father's son, and underneath the ambition and the careful calculations, there was the boy who had cried in the Costco parking lot when the family dog died, and then made Claire swear never to tell anyone. I know you are. Hargrove was gathering his documents with the quiet discretion of a man who had managed a great many rooms like this one. He caught my eye and nodded once, a small, dignified nod that carried something in it. Acknowledgement. I nodded back. Claire came around the table and put her arms around me, and I held my daughter for a while. Paul put his hand on my shoulder and kept it there. Eventually Daniel stood up. He left Renata's legal pad on the table. He walked to where I was sitting and stood there for a moment, and I could see him deciding, working through whatever wall he'd built, trying to find the door. He put his hand on top of mine. Awkward, unpracticed, he had never been physically demonstrative, even as a child. I'm sorry, Mom, he said, for the things I said to Dad about you, for all of it. I'm sorry. I looked up at him. Okay, I said. Is that all I get? For now, I said. We'll see what you do with it. And something happened in his face that I recognized a loosening, like something being put down after being carried too long. He almost smiled. "That's fair," he said. Renata picked up the legal pad on the way out. 3 months later, I flew to Edinburgh with Claire. We spent 12 days in Scotland in late April, when the light lasted until 10 in the evening, and everything was green in a way that seemed impossible, a saturated, almost aggressive green, like the land was making an argument. We drove too slowly on the wrong side of the road. We ate things we couldn't pronounce. Claire bought a hand-knitted sweater from an elderly woman in a market stall outside Inverness and wore it every single day for the rest of the trip. We called Daniel from a pub in Edinburgh on a Saturday night. He answered on the second ring, which was new. "How is it?" he asked. "Ridiculous," Claire told him. "In the best way." Mom cried at a castle. "I didn't cry at the castle," I said. "I had something in my eye." "She cried at the castle," Claire confirmed. Daniel laughed. A real laugh, not the controlled, practiced sound from the conference room, but something genuine and a little rusty, like something that hadn't been used in a while and needed to loosen up. He sounded like his father for a moment. I felt the familiar catch of it in my chest, the way grief does when it ambushes you with love. "I'm glad you went," he said. "Dad would have liked knowing you went." "I know," I said. I had put $20,000 into a fund for Claire's kids' college accounts after we got back. I had paid off Paul's remaining mortgage, which he protested and then accepted. I had written a check to the Riverside Medical Foundation, the hospital where I'd been charge nurse, the one I'd left when Martin got sick, earmarked for caregiver support services. I had put the bulk of the rest into a careful set of investments that a good financial advisor helped me structure, because I was 63 years old and I intended to live for a long time and to do things with that time. The house was mine. I had painted the kitchen the yellow I had wanted for 30 years but never gotten to because Martin had strong feelings about yellow. I wasn't being unkind to his memory. I was finally painting the kitchen. I had started a container garden on the back porch, next to the old begonias. Tomatoes, which were ambitious for my climate. My neighbors said they wouldn't take. I told her I'd been making things grow in difficult conditions for a long time, and I was fairly confident I had it handled. Some mornings I still reached for my phone first thing, the reflex of 15 years checking the monitor, listening for breathing, cataloging the day's medications in my head before my eyes were fully open. And then I remembered. And there was grief in that, real and heavy, the kind that doesn't ask permission before it sits down next to you. But there was also the morning. There was the coffee I made at whatever pace I felt like making it. There was the hour I spent reading, unhurried, in the chair by the window. There was the Sunday call with Claire, and the increasingly regular Thursday call with Daniel, who was working, slowly and imperfectly, at being different. Martin had known. Even at the end, even when the words were gone, he had known me when I walked into the room. He had written letters I didn't know about and made plans I hadn't been part of and thought carefully about what he wanted to leave behind. He had left me the truth, and the house, and the years ahead. I still thought about the $500, those few minutes when Daniel was rearranging his expression into something that looked like restraint, and Renata's pen was moving across the legal pad, and I was sitting at that table in my blue cardigan thinking, well, this is what it was. This is how it ends. Martin had always had a sense of timing. He used to make the kids wait until just the right moment to open presents, drawing it out past what was reasonable, delighting in the anticipation of it. Claire had found it maddening. Daniel had always suspected he was being strategic. He was always being strategic. Even at the end, especially at the end. $500. He'd known exactly what that room would look like in that moment, and he had set it up, and he had waited until he couldn't wait anymore to deliver the rest of it. I planted the tomatoes in early May. Against all expectations, every single one of them took.